Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today it's a little bit windy here in Portsmouth, so if you hear the wind in the background I'm really sorry. But it has been blowing through the town all day and it's my garden is barely standing, so apologise in advance. As you can probably see, the title of today's video is about my disabilities and my chronic illnesses. And the reason why I wanted to make this video is partially because the content that I'm going to be making moving forward is obviously going to be based on a lot on the fact that I am chronically ill and that I have the issues that I have. So it's important for you guys to have something to refer to and to understand a little bit more about my situation. But more importantly, or not more importantly, but funnily enough, recently I sat down and I looked at my journals and what specialists and doctors have diagnosed me with over the years, both within Western medicine and alternative medicine, and I sort of gathered my complete diagnosis, so to speak. I wrote everything down basically and sort of went through it and went because the thing is, when you have a chronic illness you get so used to having new symptoms and you get so used to going to different doctors and seeing different specialists and being all over the NHS, and which is the national healthcare system in the UK, and you sort of just you take on whatever you get thrown at you at a time. But it's very often the case that you don't really you don't really remember everything after a while because there's so many visits and so many things. So when I actually sat down and looked at this, it was quite funny. So technically now my actual diagnosis is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome resulting in craniocervical instability and atlantoaxial instability with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome tendencies, temporary paralysis, peripheral neuropathy, chronic costochondritis, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic migraines, Raynaud's phenomenon, mast cell activation disorder, and short-term memory loss. The reason why I didn't look at the camera when I said that is because I have short-term memory loss, and trying to remember all of that is quite difficult. So I can go into each and every one of these diagnoses one by one, and if you want to drop comments down below and ask me any questions, or if there's one that you're particularly interested in, let me know. But in the meantime, I'm just going to give a very brief explanation to what they all are. My underlying condition, which is the one that I started off with, is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS, which essentially the easiest way to explain that, because it is a very it's an illness that is not that well known, but it's getting more known, and a lot more people than we think actually have it. So EDS essentially is when your body doesn't produce collagen the way that it should, and it doesn't retain it the way that it should. So collagen is what builds up all of your connective tissue in your body. So that would be your joints and your muscles, your organs even, your blood vessels, everything that has connective tissue essentially in your body. And obviously depending on how severe it is, it can affect everybody quite differently, but a very common thing is for people who have a hypermobile version of EDS, because there are different versions, it's that you're very flexible and you can easily dislocate or sublux your joints. But then it obviously comes with quite a lot of things like chronic pain and chronic fatigue and that kind of things. So that's the main thing, but it can affect your blood circulation, it can affect your digestive system, it can affect a lot of different things in your body. So a lot of the other diagnoses that I have is based on EDS, which is the main issue that is wrong with my body. And then all of these other things have just kind of come in relation to that. So the next two major things that I have, again, is due to EDS. It's craniocervical instability and atlantoaxial instability. Essentially what that is, it's different areas of your neck that are unstable. It means that the muscles and the joints that are supposed to be holding my head upright are not. And I'm quite fortunate in the way that it's not bad enough for me yet to have to wear a neck brace all the time, but I have one. And I can show it to you in different videos if you want. But what it does, it compresses my nerves in my neck and it can cause a bunch of different things, chronic migraines being one of them. And it can, create lack of blood flow to the brain, so brain fog and that sort of thing is very prominent quite often, and I'm sure you'll notice somewhere throughout this video as well. Atlantoaxial instability and craniocervical instability is essentially, atlantoaxial instability is the top two vertebrae, the ones that goes in underneath your brain, and the craniocervical instability is just the rest of the neck. Unfortunately, in the UK and in Sweden, they don't actually operate on this, and that's a whole different video for you, but I'm having to do fundraising in order to get this operation done at some point so that I can live a slightly more functional life. But again, that's a different video. Then I have tendencies, as the doctor's saying, to postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is really a mouthful. Now, the thing is, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS for short, which I think is really funny, is essentially that the blood doesn't go around in your body as it should. Your body doesn't, or the arteries in your body doesn't push the blood up as it should. So when you're changing your postural position, postural orthostatic, essentially what it does is your blood vessels don't really push the blood up to the brain as it should, and it can cause people to faint or throw up even and stuff like that, and it's not a very pleasant thing. So you have to be quite careful, and you have to keep your blood pressure up, and it can fluctuate quite a lot, the blood pressure, so you can go from having really low blood pressure to quite high blood pressure. The most common thing with POTS really is that it's quite low, and that's the ones where you really notice it. And then when it goes really low, then your heart starts working really fast, and you feel like you're having really bad palpitations and you don't know what to do. It's almost like having a panic attack in some ways. So I have tendencies to that. Again, not the most severe version, but it still affects my everyday life quite a bit, and I have to monitor it very often. I have a blood pressure machine at home that I continuously use to make sure that I'm at a right place with it. Then I have something fun called, well, this is a combination of two things. I have peripheral neuropathy, and I have temporary paralysis. Now, a lot of that is potentially due to my neck, and the fact that I sublux and dislocate my shoulders quite easily. So, being very unstable in your spine in general means that nerves will get squeezed. And if nerves will get squeezed quite frequently or even damaged, then you lose feeling in certain areas, which is the peripheral neuropathy. And sometimes it's a lasting feeling that can last for a very long time, and sometimes it's very short. I daily, every time I wake up, because when you sleep you toss quite a bit, or at least I do, I've squeezed some kind of nerve, and I always wake up not feeling at least half of my hand, both of my hands, and it's most of the time my ulnar nerve that has been squeezed. And it doesn't mean that I've been lying like this for the entire night or anything like that. It just means that I've done something throughout the night that means that my elbow or my ulnar nerve somehow has gotten squeezed, and therefore when I wake up I don't have any feeling in my hands at all. On those bits. It's mostly those three fingers, and then like all the way down in the arm. I can most of the time still feel my thumb and my pointy finger, index finger. Index finger? Yeah. So that's always fun, but there are cases or situations or periods even of my life where I've been prone to do this a lot more, and it's lasted for up to a day, where I haven't been able to feel, or on many of those occasions even move my my hand, and this is my temporary paralysis. So there's been a few situations where I haven't been able to move the hand at all, but most often again what happens is I can't move those three fingers, so then my day essentially ends up with me going around like this. and very often I won't have much strength in my hand here either, or have a hard time controlling it, so it'll literally just be me going like this the entire day, which is quite funny. I call it Mr. Burns because I just go like that. There's another YouTuber who, Jessica Kelgren Fossard, which I probably will refer to 100 times throughout this channel because she's brilliant. But she has the same kind of thing, but she has it again a lot worse than me. So she'll go around and she has really floppy hands, and they just kind of go like that, which mine does on those occasions. In addition to that, I have chronic costochondritis, which essentially is when you get a inflammation in the cartilage between your heart and your lungs. And this can be brought on, most of the time people just get it one-off, but then if you get it more than one-off, it's very common that it becomes a chronic thing. So essentially every time I get a tiny bit sick, or have like a tiny bit of a bug or anything like that, or just because I have inflammation in my body quite a lot, generally speaking, with joints and muscles being moved around and causing inflammation, or also, funnily enough, because of stress, then it creates a inflammation between the heart and the chest, and it kind of, the first time you have it, if you have it really bad, kind of feels like you're having a heart attack, and it can be quite scary. But after you've been rushed into the hospital a fair few times with it, and they can't find anything wrong with you, then generally speaking, you'll kind of get used to it, and you sort of start to feel the tell signs of when it's starting to come on and how difficult it is, and you know, the different kind of little things, so you can tell apart when it's actually serious and when it's not. And they do, at least in my case, get better when the more frequent ones. There are still ones that I have that are really, really difficult, but generally speaking, they tend to get a little bit easier. I have chronic fatigue and chronic pain, which is also due to the fact that I have EDS, and the body is constantly trying and working and trying to keep everything together, and it doesn't allow for much else energy in my body, basically, and it leaves you with a lot of chronic fatigue. And we can go into much more what that means from a physiological point of view and stuff in a different video as well. It doesn't mean that you're just tired all the time, but again, we will go into that in a different video. Like I mentioned before, chronic migraines, they can become quite debilitating, and unfortunately I have the ones that come from nowhere and I don't really get any tell signs. I think a lot of the time it has to do with blood pressure, and a lot of the time it has to do with my nerves in my neck, so they just kind of stop me dead in my tracks, and I just have to go and take medicine and lie down and hope for the best. But sometimes they can last for a really long time. I had a concussion about a month or so ago, and I ended up with having a migraine for 18 hours straight. The staff at the QA was really lovely, which is the hospital up in Portsmouth. However, there was a lady who told me that she couldn't do anything, and I just had to go home and lie down again. And it was my favourite part of the day. Anyway, I also have mast cell activation disorder, which essentially is the whole thing that my body is really prone to inflammation. And again, we can go in a different video onto what that means more, but there are certain triggers that you need to stay away from so that the body doesn't become more easily inflamed. And I also have Raynaud's phenomenon, which is essentially similar to the postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS. My body doesn't circulate the blood as it should, so a lot of the extremities that I have, such as my hands and my feet and that sort of thing, doesn't really get blood, and can very often, when it's a bit windy or something, even if it's in the summertime or when it's a bit humid, they just completely go white, blue, purple and yellow, and they won't get any blood or oxygen to them, essentially. And the last thing that obviously is what I was talking about, or as to before, which is going to probably make this channel a bit more interesting sometimes because I will not remember what I'm meant to be saying, is my short-term memory loss. And it's currently kind of under investigation as to why I have it. There's a thought that, you know, because I have a hernia at the back of my brain, it might have affected something. I don't know, or we don't know. But ever since over the past year, since I've had more issues with my illness and it's gotten significantly worse, and I've started having more pressure inside my head with the migraines and stuff like that, and that memory thing, right? Essentially what I'm trying to say, because I probably won't remember what I was meant to say now, it's become a lot more prominent. And when I say short-term memory loss, it's not like I talk to you and I won't remember what you are saying necessarily, but a very good example is my PA, for instance, Sarah. She talks to me a lot and we will have a conversation and I will try to explain something to her, but I will start the subject and then I will forget what I was starting to talk about halfway through the sentence. So then I have to start over and backtrack, and it takes a lot longer than it should to get to a point and actually make a decision on something. And it can be the same thing if I have really bad days where I have really bad memory loss, and I also have really bad brain fog, whereas, you know, my brain doesn't really want to compute in general. Then I can go around. The other day I made lunch, and for some reason my friend was popping over to get something from my flat, and I turned the oven off, and then I went about my day and I forgot that I'd made lunch. And despite of the fact that I was hungry and my body was telling me that I was hungry, I still forgot that I made lunch. So my initial thing was, oh, maybe I should go and order something because I haven't had time to make lunch. And then I realised, hang on a minute, after a while, and I realised I had actually made lunch and I had to go back and do these things. So obviously it's, you know, it can have quite severe impacts, and obviously when it comes to me taking my medicines and stuff like that, then, you know, that has to be very controlled, because otherwise I will forget. And my PA is really, really good, because otherwise I would never be able to run this business, and I genuinely say that I would never be able to run this business without her, because as it is now and where I'm at now, with health and everything, it wouldn't work, and the memory thing is a big part of that. So, and that's actually a video that I do want to make as well, to talk about more in detail, because that's something that is very frustrating, more than the physical illnesses sometimes for me. So that is all of my illnesses, diagnoses, craziness that I have going on in my life at the moment. And hopefully now you understand why I named this channel Not As Advertised, because obviously not really visible. And I want to be able to bring more awareness on what invisible illnesses are and what a lot of people struggle with on a daily, but we don't really talk about, and we need to talk about it more. It doesn't mean that you have a default in your body, it's just a different way of living. Obviously it's not something that you necessarily want to have, but it's something that you have, and you can live a good life regardless. You just have to do things a little bit differently sometimes. But then again, a lot of people have to do things differently for not physical reasons. It might be a learning disability, or, you know, a mental illness, or whatever it is. And we are getting really good at talking about mental illnesses. So I definitely think that it shouldn't be an issue to talk about physical illnesses. And especially the ones that aren't always that visible, needs to be brought out in the light and be a bit more visible. So I'd love for you guys who do watch this to tell me a bit about yourselves, and if you have any chronic illnesses that aren't visible, your experiences with it. And I shall be back with you next week with another video. I hope you have a good week. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and press the notifications bell once you've subscribed, so that you're notified when I upload new content. Thank you very much. Have a good week, guys. Bye.